Unlock the secrets of the supernatural with Paranormal M. If you're fascinated by ghostly encounters, mysterious phenomena, and things that go bump in the night, subscribing and turning on notifications is a must. Join us on this eerie journey. My Uni Accommodation was haunted. For context, in the UK, for the first year of university, we're usually put into shared accommodation, and for some reason, our one was haunted. Anyways, starts of chill for the first 2 weeks, getting drunk, making friends, and then all of a sudden I start hearing and seeing things. The door to our rooms are loud as hell, and you can hear when someone enters or leaves rooms, or enters the kitchen. There were 8 of us in our flat at that thing. And I would hear one or multiple knocks on my door, sometimes quiet, sometimes loud. I would also hear shuffling like footsteps in my room late at night, but only if I was in the room alone. Then about a month in, we're all in the kitchen discussing weird stuff that's been happening to all of us. And while we're talking about how it could be haunted half-heartedly, my flatmate feels something tap her shoulder, and I was the only one who could have reached and possibly done it, but I didn't, and safe to say, we all left the kitchen. Lots of weird crap happened, but here are the main events. I told my parents about the whole ordeal, and my mom put a cross in my room, and in the middle of the night it fell over forward when originally it was placed on its back, slanting against the wall on my desk. The natural way would be to maybe slip on its back. 2. In the kitchen, 5 of us were sitting and eating, when in the corner of my eye, I see my drawer open. And then all of us are staring at it because, what the hell, it just opened on its own, and then it slammed shut. It was one of those drawers that have a soft close, so I don't even know how that was possible. Then we were all spooked. When we were about to leave, when a knife that was on a chopping board spun off the counter onto the floor. For context, a small butter knife, not like Scream or anything. I was in my room doing my makeup with my flatmate when she said that she saw a black shadow thing in my mirror. And I was used to all the weird stuff and kind of brushed it off. She left a little earlier, or rather she left a little later, and as I'm jamming to music and getting ready for my, my Yankee Candle, the candle in that thick, heavy glass with the top, no lie, it flies off my shelf to the other side of my desk. Scared the life out of me. I got chills, grabbed my shit, and slept in my flatmate's room for that night. Before going out clubbing, where I haven't even drank yet, me and all my flatmates are eating and chatting in the hallway, which has those automatic lights that turn off every 30 seconds. She stood in the middle of the hallway and the lights turn off. But they do have a small green light, I think, which is the battery light, where they can sort of create small shadows, so it's not pitch black. I go to press the switch for the light, and I see this big-ass man-like figure a few feet behind her, but I just quickly switch the light on. Not to ruin the night's mood or scare her, I told her the next day when we were hungover. Other stuff happened, but these seemed the most significant to me. And also the people who lived in the flat next and above us said weird stuff happened with them too, so it wasn't just us. Strange experience where I went into a parallel universe or alternate reality. This happened back in 2014. I went to Walgreens a few blocks from my house at night to buy a few items. While I was there, this guy down the aisle from me started talking to me like he knew me, but I didn't know him. Never seen him before in my life. He asks me how things are going and asked if I was still working for Joe. Joe was the name of my boss that I worked for a while when I was in college. I told him no, that I wasn't still working for Joe because I had graduated and gotten a full-time job. I was so confused and asked how he knew me. He seemed surprised that I didn't remember him and said that he was Joe's son, which was weird because the Joe I worked for didn't even have a son. Just 2 daughters. He could tell I was confused and asked if I was okay. I replied that I was fine, but that I didn't remember him. He was still shocked that I didn't know him. Eventually, the conversation ended, and I went my own way. A few months later, I ran into the old boss, Joe, and I told him I ran into someone that said that he was his son, and asked just to make sure that he didn't have a son. He said, "Nope, not that I know of." I still don't know what to make of that encounter, but it was bizarre to say the least. My theory is that I somehow entered an alternate, maybe an alternate universe or an alternate reality, but I don't really know. Maybe I dreamed the whole thing. Who knows? Ask Reddit. In fall of 2016, I moved into half of a really old house. It was built in the 1880s, a stone's throw from the original campus of Indiana University, which is now a park filled with homeless people and drug addicts. The owners basically turned it into a weird duplex. My friend had lived maybe right before I moved in, and he claimed that it was haunted, but I didn't really believe him because he was a bit of an odd guy. Anyways, the layout of the house was also weird. You walked in the door, and were in the living room type of a space, and then you kept walking and there was a doorway to the bedroom. And past that was the kitchen. No doors, only door inside the apartment was to the bathroom and the one that led to the shared basement. So my first night there was uneventful. I was a little uncomfortable because I hadn't lived by myself in a long time, and I was just feeling lonely and kind of on edge. I stayed up late and then eventually fell asleep, but I woke up again around 3 a.m. Cliché, I know, but what woke me up was what sounded like a group of drummers drumming on every flat surface of the living room. It went on for a while, and I was completely terrified. It was just a cacophony of sound. After about 2 or 3 minutes, I finally gathered up all the balls to get up and check on it. And as soon as I passed the threshold to the living room, it just stopped. Nothing happened the rest of the night, but I didn't get much sleep. A couple days later, a friend was visiting, and he was about to leave. We were standing by the front door next to my bookshelf, and I told him about how I was having trouble sleeping, and the story from the first night. As I was saying this, a book threw itself off the bookshelf and onto the floor 3 feet away. It had to fly past the dresser to the shelf that was perched and landed between the two of us. He just gave me a creeped out look and said that he had to go. I don't blame him. Eventually, I asked the guy in the other half what was up, as he'd lived there for about 8 years. He told me that no one stayed longer than a year and they all reported the same shit. For whatever reason, he said nothing ever happened on his side. It doesn't make sense, but there it is. Here's an edit with some more stories that I added below. Alright, so a lot of what happened was really small stuff. You would just hear stuff shuffling around in the room that you weren't in. The light to the shared basement would randomly come on at night, even when the neighbor was traveling. Sometimes I would feel something get into my bed, like a cat, and nothing was there, even after I ended up with a pair of cats. I had a lot, and I mean a lot of nightmares there. That was the bulk of it. But I have 2 stories that were more notable, and here they are. So the first one isn't that long, but again, I was woken up by something in the middle of the night, like a loud crashing sound. So, in the living room, there was an old electric organ with about 6 inches of clearance from the wall. I stashed a folding chair like you would buy at IKEA in between the organ and the wall. The crashing sound was the folding chair being unfolded and slammed into the middle of the room. By this point, I already had the cats, and they were just sitting there, kind of just staring at it when I came into the room. Secondly, I will admit, has a sort of conventional explanation that I actually find much, much scarier than if it were paranormal. So at some point, I reconnected with an old friend who had moved home from California when his dad got cancer. He ended up living with me, which was not really ideal, because as I said earlier, there were no doors, no privacy. But we became close friends. Being poor, we made it work. So we ended up dating this girl who lived about 3 blocks down the road and would often leave and sleep over there. I got him a job where I worked 9 to 5, and we would alternate driving to work in the mornings. Anyways, one night he's over at the girl's house spending the night, and I went to bed. Sometime in the night, he came back home and he went to the bathroom, which was in my room. Remember, no doors, so he had to walk past my bed to use the toilet. I wake up and he's in there taking a piss, and I can see the light on underneath the door. When he's done and turns the light off, unusual, and lays down to sleep on the couch like usual, it was winter and the cats had been escaping and coming back late at night, and one of them had been outside earlier, so I wondered if he had come in with my roommate. And if not, if he would have seen him come home and be waiting at the door. So I decided to get up and check. I got to the door, open it, no Luke. I close the door and he's sitting right there by my feet with his sister. Okay, I look at the couch. Roomie's already fast asleep as usual. All is good. I go back to sleep. I wake up in the morning and Roomie's gone. I go about my routine, step out to smoke a cigarette while my car warms up. As it gets closer to 9, I begin to debate leaving him to drive himself when I see him come sprinting down the sidewalk. We get in the car and start to go to work, and I ask him what time he left in the morning to go back for seconds at his girlfriend's place. He said he was there all night, and I about shit my pants. So I know for a fact the door was locked because the door had some ancient fucking lock design that's locking automatically every time you used it. I also know for a fact that my cat was outside and in the morning he was back in the house. I don't know what to make of it, but it was really unsettling. And just for fun, a third story. I said earlier that my house wasn't far from a park that junkies and homeless people, frequented. In summer of 2017, it was late, and I had heard a bunch of noise on my porch, so I went to investigate. There were 2 dudes huddled right by my steps with a flashlight, and I asked them what the fuck they were doing. They replied using English words, but not something I would describe as language. Then they started walking toward that park through my yard, and the whole time, one of them was just calling back to me. "Hey, it's the dark. Sorry." I always go, "Oh, I don't have paranormal encounters." Then I remember all my weird experiences. Let's start here. Since I was a kid, my family volunteered at a living history museum. If you don't know what that is or want an idea of what this place was like, they basically got a bunch of old houses and buildings and put them on a plot of land. And throughout the year, they had different events and had school groups come through and staff were dressed up and gave tours. One time, when we were volunteering there in spring for an event, it was a very, very cold and rainy day, so there were no visitors. But we had to be there just in case there was. Since it was so cold, Everyone was huddled around a heater trying to keep warm and get through the day. To combat the boredom, we told stories. One of the older women who worked there got to telling spooky stories from her childhood that were supposedly true. A bit later, everyone there saw a curtain in the house across from us get pulled open as if someone was watching us. That can be possibly debunked as a heater blowing the curtain, but it was pulled in the middle as if a hand was cupping around it, so it's kind of hard to say. My second story from this place was on the 4th of July when we were closing down. All guests were gone, buildings were locked up, and the staff were getting their things and leaving. I was in the village square area all by myself waiting for my mom and sister, and I was looking up to watch the fireworks. My town's pretty big on fireworks shows, right next to the museum. And all of a sudden, I hear the organ in the church start playing, which really weirded me out because I watched everybody come out of there, and the building gets locked up probably 5 minutes before I heard the noise. The next day, I confirmed with the people there that it got completely locked up when I saw them do so. Okay, so next experience happened a bit after the organ one. So basically, I had this pair of earbuds, and all of a sudden they started acting up when I was listening to music. My music would get paused randomly without me doing anything, and I would hear a creepy nursery rhyme and lullaby song that you would hear in a horror movie playing in the earbuds. But I'd press play on the music and it would stop. This would continue to happen again occasionally before it ramped up. It got to where the lullaby played constantly, and I couldn't do anything about it. I even unplugged the earbuds, and it continued. At that point, I just threw them away. Last story here. This one happened last summer. So throughout the day, I kept randomly feeling a patch of hot air that was about torso height, and was about the same size as an adult man with some muscle to him. It was burning hot. Now let's fast forward to the night. I'm sleeping and having a weird dream, and in this dream I'm at a park and there's a cement building with bathrooms and a hallway and benches, kind of like a baseball dugout. I walked through the hallway past the bathroom doors to the back left corner of the hallway. The farther I go, the more and more dark and heavy and just evil it feels. And when I finally get to the corner, it's burning hot, like that feeling I kept feeling all day. I run out and suddenly bolt wide awake. I'm not even half asleep at this point. I'm fully awake and conscious, and all of a sudden, I'm slammed back against my wall and start getting choked. Something has my hands around my neck and is choking me and pushing me back, and then all of a sudden stops. I still feel just the most negative energy I have ever had in my room and start telling it to sternly that it needs to leave, and that did the trick. Then a couple of nights later, I'm lying in my dark room about to go to sleep when all of a sudden I feel that negative energy again. I tell it to leave, and after doing that for a few minutes, the feeling goes away, and thankfully I haven't felt it again. And if anybody can hear that sound in the background while I'm talking here, that's no joke. A hose outside of my house that turned on by itself. Someone with knowledge, please tell me what's going on. My husband and I, both in our early 20s, moved into our first house together in Italy this past November while expecting our first child. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary. I was alone in the house all day while he was at work. And for a month by myself while he was in Germany for work, I was very pregnant and asleep a lot of the time, but when I was awake, I didn't experience anything notable. About a week before our baby was born, my husband and I both started hearing creaking and the doors closing by themselves. Things would fall off the walls, etc. And he's not really a believer in any sense, so him validating these things made me start to have feelings of concern. The day I went into labor, we heard a door slam on the other side of the house. But because we were making sure that we were prepared to bring home a whole new human, we kind of ignored it. Flash forward to now, our baby is 2.5 months old, and last week a red rubber ducky was placed outside of our bedroom door, sometime between 2 a.m. and 5 a.m. while everyone was asleep in our bedroom. The baby sleeps in a bedside bassinet. The rubber duckies were all placed on the bathroom counter, which is obviously completely sturdy, and there were 5 of them. Why would only one have been specifically placed outside of our door in the hallway? And today, I always shut lights off in our rooms as I'm leaving them, and generally keep lights off during the day anyway to conserve energy since it's light out. It's just my baby and I in the house, and I run into our bedroom to grab something that I left in there and turn the lights off and close the door. I go back into that area of our house into her nursery, and about 5 minutes later, and I see the bedroom light is on. I shut it off and go back into the living room, and just a little bit ago, I went into her nursery again to grab something of hers, and see that there are 2 out of 3 stuffed animals I had arranged together months ago, just casually tossed in the middle of the room. We're the first people to live in the house, confirmed by our landlord who built it. And when my mother-in-law came to stay about a month ago, she was awoken by something grabbing her foot. Strange encounter. Still no answers. A little background info on me. I'm a first-time Reddit user, and I only created this because my girlfriend recommended I share my experience with the users on here. I'm a first responder in a major city on the East Coast of the US with over 10 years of experience. I don't get rattled by things easily, but this encounter was very unsettling, and I wanted to see if anyone else had an experience like this. Earlier this month, May 2019, I decided to take a trip to a convenience store to get a few household items. The store is located about 3 city blocks from my house, but since it was a rainy day, I decided to drive. As I was heading southbound, I was stopped at the red light when I observed a white male approximately 50 or 55 years of age walking northbound with a thick-framed glass, or eyeglasses, and wearing a gray t-shirt, blue jeans, tan work boots, and had a Philadelphia 76ers hat that was very unique with the Liberty Bell and a snake wrapped around it. That's what got my attention in the first place. I thought it was a sick hat. About 30 seconds later, I arrived at the parking lot of my destination. I exited my vehicle and did a cursory check of my surroundings, which I always do as a force of habit. I immediately noticed the same man with the same hat and glasses, dressed completely different, other than that he was standing approximately 50 feet from where I was staring at me. So I'm guessing where he was staring at me, grinning. There was no way that he could have sprinted and made it to my location in that period of time, let alone perform a full wardrobe change in the same time. I waved at him and asked him if he had just been at a location where I observed him. He turned and slowly walked away without saying anything. Ghost of a young boy. I never spoke publicly about this, It might not be the most action-packed story, but it is 100% true. I'll put that on my honor. Summer 2003. Me, a 15-year-old male, and two of my friends are sitting on the couch at our friend's house. We'll call him Joe. Now, before I recount my actual experience, I gotta preface it by saying Joe always had a free house during the day because his parents were working. So we would routinely spend our days there. Joe didn't bring it up much, but occasionally he would talk about this little boy ghost that haunted the house. Of course, we were very dismissive. Actually, we broke his balls relentlessly because of it. We were at his house all the time, almost every day for hours, and never seen a thing. Myself and my two friends were sitting on the couch that faced the stairway, just bullshitting with the group, and we hear what sounded like a person running down the steps. We all look up and see a preteen boy fly down the stairs and very loudly, almost violently, slam the vestibule and the front storm door. Now, Joe has a brother that age, so let me and my two friends run over, and we open the door expecting to find him running down the street. We didn't see anyone on the block, and my friend made a comment that little Joe wasn't nearly fast enough to make it down the block before we got to the door. He was kind of fat. We go to sit back down, and before the last one of us was in the door, quote-unquote little Joe comes up to the top of the steps and asked, "Who the fuck is slamming the doors?" That's when it all clicked. I was in denial. Hell, all three of us were. We grilled this kid under threat of an ass beating if he had a friend over or anything to rationalize the experience. The house is a row home that sits mid-block on a big street. If anyone left that house, I would have seen them. I was 3 steps behind when I seen that kid run out. Even if it was a kid and he picked the lock at warp speed, then ran to the abandoned house next door, I would have seen or heard something. The image of that transparent little bastard is burnt into all of our brains. Made me a believer in something. Can cats see ghosts? I hate it when the cats are being weird. This happened a couple weeks ago. I was walking by the door of our lounge and noticed our cat, Luna, just sitting and staring. So I took this video. I actually took 3 videos because our other cat came in and started acting weird too. We've had the mannequin for a while now, and they weren't staring at it, but behind it at the bricks. I don't know what they saw or heard, but nothing was there. I'm thinking maybe something from outside that they could hear, but I couldn't. And last night, I came back home after a brief errand, and Luna was in the living room staring up into nothing again, moving his head as he followed whatever he saw with his eyes. I did get it on video, but I'm not sure if I can post more than 1 video at a time. Earlier this week, I was on the sofa watching TV, and the TV's on a Lazy Susan that can rotate. But then I'd go outside to talk with the repairman. When I came back in about 15 minutes later, the television was turned almost 90 degrees. I didn't get a photo. It was freaky, but I blamed one of the cats, thinking maybe he had jumped on the TV cabinet and put all of his weight on the TV so that it turned. Fast forward to last night. My partner had gone to bed, and at some point, I noticed that one of our very large music speakers was rotated completely around, again around 90 degrees, so that instead of facing out into the room like it usually is, it was facing the front door and foyer area. I showed my partner this morning, and he asked if he had turned it that way for some reason, and he said that he didn't remember even ever turning it. By the way, there's no logical reason that we'd want to project sound toward our front door. And then I noticed that both speakers were turned toward the front door. Again, he said he didn't remember doing it when we last listened to records last week, but that doesn't necessarily mean that he didn't for some reason. He's a music guy and has spun records for parties and events off and on for years, and he's very knowledgeable about how music should be projected in any given room. He admitted that he can't imagine why he'd ever want to turn our speakers that way. He's more of a ghost skeptic, but says that it was very weird. Don't watch The Conjuring. So growing up, my mom and dad were together for 12 years, and then stuff happened, a divorce, but before the divorce, my mom started seeing things that she didn't quite understand. Then again, she did because she came from a Native American culture, or heritage, so they would talk about these things, but she didn't understand why they were attacking her. Specifically, she would ask my dad for help, but he sent her to a psychiatric hospital, and she's now diagnosed with schizophrenia. After all that happened, she would come home and not be the same. She would yell out of nowhere at something that really wasn't there, and she would have seizures, falling asleep while driving, constantly scared all of us. But I was there through all of it. I just remembered this one specific time when we were watching The Conjuring, and it was at the same part where the mother was getting it. The demon released from her body, and my mom went into a seizure. All of my sisters were panicking and freaking out, and my mom's boyfriend at the time told us to go into another room. So I took me and my sisters into another room, and we closed the door, and we were all just trying to calm my sister down. All of a sudden, my dog starts growling at the door, and the shadow walks up, and I stand up and I swing the door open and nothing's there. Then she runs under the bed. Nothing's happened ever since that day. My mom's been fine since then. There are things that happen here and there, but she still sometimes falls asleep while driving, which is why me and my sister drive now. That's the only thing that's permanently affected her from this. Don't watch The Conjuring, Part 2. Okay, so since I said I was going to tell you the whole story, here it goes. When I was younger, spooky stuff always happened, but I never would pay any mind to it. When my mom and dad started having problems, my mom changed, like a scary change. It hurt to see my mother like that. It all really started falling down one night when my mom busted in me and my sister's room. She was so mad and she says, "Why the fuck are y'all coming into my room pestering me in my sleep?" Me and my sister were so confused because we went to sleep a couple hours earlier, but it wasn't us. So she checked my little sister's room and they were knocked out cold. My mom just told us to go back to bed after that, but she came back. Not even 5 minutes later, screaming at us again, saying that we were whispering in her ear. My heart dropped. My dad came into our room asking everyone what was going on. My mom explained that me and my sister were explained. My mom was calling us liars and accusing us of taunting her, so my dad made all of us sleep together. Me and my sisters all slept next to each other on the floor. And my mom started screaming again, "Why won't you let me sleep?" All of us woke up scared, wondering why she was doing this to us. Her dad told us to go to sleep in the living room, so we did, and they locked their door behind us. We all slept sound after that, and a couple of weeks roll by and my mom and dad are starting to settle a divorce because he sent her to a psychiatric hospital. She was there for a week. and my dad sent us to our uncle's house and moved out while everybody was gone. My mom came home and she was like a zombie, like they took her soul out of her body. She constantly talked about how they were treating her like an experiment. She said they taunted her about how they were going to have control of her life, and no one would believe her. She says that they put a microchip into her body, and they still talk to her till this day. Then she started having random seizures. She started falling asleep on the road no matter how long the drive is. Me, age 12 at the time, had to step up and learn how to drive because I was scared for our safety. I knew something was really wrong, that whatever she was saying was for real. One time, me and my sisters were picking up things around the house, and my mom was sitting on the couch facing the hallway, and she breaks out into a seizure. She was trying to talk, and she finally said, "Who is she?" And still shaking, she lifts up her arm to point at the hallway. My face turned white as I looked toward the hallway. The lights, they flickered, and you could see a faint shadow. I seen it with my own eyes. I was forced to keep it to myself because my sisters didn't quite understand, and I didn't want to startle them. After my mom gained consciousness, I asked her what happened, and she was just as confused as I was. She said, "It felt like I was being shocked by a taser. I know the feeling too well. I had to get used to it, working for security." And then I asked her, "Well, what about the girl?" She looked at me with fear in her heart and asked, "Did you see her too?" I shook my head with a hesitant yes, not wanting to scare her even more. She said, "Don't be scared, they can't touch you." Just seeing that, I knew it was bullshit. I don't want to see that, and I was worried. I just told her, "Okay." A few nights go by and weird stuff was happening all over the house. Scratching on the walls, knocking on the windows, our dogs growling at thin air. It was starting to be too much. One night, my mom had finally come home with her new boyfriend. Eye roll. She starts telling me that I'm going to go pick up your auntie and her boyfriend. They're in Texas. I angrily asked, "Is your new boyfriend coming?" She shakes her head yes, chuckling at me, and I said, "I don't want to go." She said okay, and headed on her own way. I was at home alone for about an hour, and me and my dog were in the living room, and I was watching TV, when all of a sudden I hear this loud crying. And if you're wondering, I did forget to mention that my sister was out with our dad, so I knew 100% that it wasn't them. It was coming from my mom's room. I get up and start walking towards this loud weeping. It sounded like it was coming from a younger girl. I get to her door and I press my ear against it, and it's louder. I swing the door open and the room is empty. My dog starts growling and barking viciously, like he's seen another dog in his presence. I take off to my room and turn my lights on and start drawing to get my mind off things. I couldn't call my mom because at the time I had a phone with 30 minutes that I had used up already. Then my dog started growling at the hallway, and this sort of tall shadow walks up, and my dog walks right up to it and starts going crazy. Everything starts going crazy. I started hearing knocks on the window. My closet was shaking so bad that you could hear my hangers rattling. My radio started blasting eerie music. I just hid under my blankets until all of a sudden everything went silent. Pull my head out from the blankets and everything's normal. My dog's sitting down. My radio was turned off. I was so scared. Finally, my mom came home. I cried to her and told her everything. She gave me the evilest look a mother could give her child, and she says, "That's what you get for trying to be mad at me." My heart dropped because I never knew my mom to speak to me like this. Braided hair and phone placed elsewhere. I want to tell you about two events that took place in 2020, and then towards the end of 2021. As an idea, I lived with my grandparents. It was summer of 2020, and one day my grandfather had an accident and had to be taken to the hospital. My grandmother left with him, and they left me home alone. They thought that they might make it back by that evening, so they left me with some work to do. I had to feed the animals that we had at home. When it was already getting dark, around 10 p.m., I decided to call my grandmother to see what was going on. She said that she didn't think that she would come back home that evening, so I stayed alone for the whole night, closed all the windows and locked the doors. I was very afraid of thieves, especially since I was alone. That evening, I didn't sleep well. I watched TV and left the light on in 2 rooms. Around 9 a.m., I started talking on a video call with a friend. I got into bed and wrapped myself up. The phone was on the bed in front of me. Around 10 a.m., started telling my friend that it was possible, or that it was probably possible to fall asleep. So I closed my eyes and fell asleep on the video call. When I woke up, I heard my phone ringing. I wanted to take it from where it was, but it wasn't there. It was placed face down on the bedside table. I didn't pay attention to it and just answered the phone and talked to my grandmother, who said that she was on her way and she was coming home. While I was waiting for her, I realized that I hadn't put the phone on the bedside table before I fell asleep. I asked my friend if she saw anything strange, and she told me that after she saw that I fell asleep, she took a screenshot and hung up. In 2021, around November, I stayed with my aunt because my grandparents' house was under construction. So me and my grandparents stayed with my aunt, and her house wasn't far from ours. I stayed with her for about a week, but my aunt had to leave the country, so my grandparents went with her. The problem is, they had to leave home around 3 a.m. to get to the airport. So they left around 2 or so in the morning, and I was still awake when they left. I was watching videos. My hair was loose that evening because I had just washed my head. After some time, I fell asleep. I fell asleep face up, and my grandparents still hadn't returned. When I woke up around 6 in the morning, I saw that my hair was braided. The problem was that it wasn't braided with a hair elastic, it was simply braided loosely, and only on one side. I got out of bed and checked to see if my grandparents had arrived home, and they were home. When my grandmother woke up, I asked her if she had entered the room while I was sleeping and braided my hair. She said no, and that she'd gone straight to bed and slept. I feel unsafe in my own home, and I don't know what to do. I remember getting really into spirits thanks to my friend who was into spiritual stuff and was trying out witchcraft, and I happened to get caught up in it. I remember her introducing me to my spirit guides and confirming that I had more than one who I knew of. So I went out and got myself a pendulum. I could speak to her more often and get some advice every now and again. I got really into it, and eventually I would start to see her around my house. But there's nothing wrong with that. It started maybe a month after that she started appearing to me, that I started hearing a male voice from any time between 11 p.m. and 1 a.m. I ignored him at first, thinking that it was just my imagination, but eventually I started indulging in it and started conversing with him through my pendulum. I found out that his name was Shirley, and he was fairly nice and claimed to be another one of my spirit guides. I didn't question it, as I felt drawn to him in the same way that I was drawn to my first spirit guide. I forgot to mention her name as a guider. Her name is Guider. I eventually told my friend about this, and she warned me to be careful, but never outright said that he had malicious intentions. Being a bit naive in the situation, yeah, I know this is stupid, but I was so enamored by him, almost like I was in a trance. I allowed him to touch me. He claimed he loved me, and I thought nothing of it and told my friend. This is where I really should have been concerned, since she told me spirit guides shouldn't fall in love with the one that they're supposed to protect. But I ignored her, and nothing really happened. I continued to talk to him like normal until one night that I remember. It was like 12:30, and I was lying in bed, and I felt something watching me, which I've gotten used to by now, and so I tried to ignore it. Until I felt a sensation on my neck, back, and waist, like someone had grabbed me and tried to spoon me. I immediately got up and went to my pendulum and contacted Shirley, asking if it was him, and he confirmed my suspicion. I didn't sleep that night. I eventually got a glimpse of him as I was going downstairs to try to get a drink, and I saw all black, a figure crouched behind my sofa. He looked like the Rake, if I were to compare his body to anything except that he was all black with white eyes. I was too scared to even go downstairs. I think it started to get worse when my friend called me up saying Guider was in the corner of her room and not with me. I was a bit scared and started talking to him, trying to understand what was going on, until my friend told me to stop talking to him and wait until she came over on that weekend. I didn't talk to him at all. And at the weekend, she performed an exorcism on the necklace that I wore, as she sensed that he had latched himself onto that. And everything went smoothly, and I felt safe. Until 4 months ago, I started hearing knocking at my front door every night, and I seemed to be the only one who could hear it. I spoke to my friend, and she came over and admitted that she could hear it as well. I don't know what to do. The knocking feels like it's taunting me, while the constant feeling of being watched is making me insanely paranoid. I don't know what to do. A few nights ago, I saw a black figure in the corner of my room. I felt a wave of immense anger, and I just broke down in tears. I'm scared and I don't know what to do. I spoke with people on the witchcraft subreddit, and they claimed that it was quote-unquote shadow people. But I know for a fact that it was not. A laugh from nowhere. Back in college, I was hanging out with one of my friends, and one night I realized too late that there was no more public transport available. So I asked one of my best friends to take me home on his scooter, since we don't live too far away from each other. He agreed, so we decided to hang out longer with everybody, and we have a few drinks. Don't worry, everyone sobered up by the time that we headed home. It's been more than a decade ago now, but from what I can remember, we took off at around 1 or 2 a.m. The roads were empty, and it was super quiet, so we chatted happily while on the road. We got maybe to this area where there were no houses, only trees that were far apart from each other. So if there were people there, they would be very visible, even at 1 a.m., as the moonlight was bright enough that night. We were telling jokes and laughing out loud, partly to shake off the eerie quiet of the night, when suddenly we heard a woman's laugh, loud enough that we both got quiet instantly. It sounded like it came from right behind me. Keep in mind that we were on a moving scooter on an isolated road at 2 a.m. We both instantly got chills, and I immediately wanted to cry. I am a scaredy cat, yet I love these sorts of stories. He quickly asked me, "Who was that?" I looked behind, and on both sides of the road, there was no one there. Not a single person. Not even a stray dog. I looked up at the trees, because it was mostly coconut trees, so I looked to check if there was a person on top for some reason, but nope. I laughed nervously and said to him, "You heard it too?" "There's no one around." We both agreed that it sounded like it came from behind us. Fearing the worst, we drove faster until we got out of that isolated area. He still had to drive back on that same road after he dropped me off, but he made sure to drive fast. Even more than a decade later, we remember that experience and bring it up from time to time as one of our creepiest, unexplained experiences that we both have. This happened when I was meditating almost 20 years ago. When I was in high school, I used to meditate very regularly and would often have weird experiences while doing so, like feeling physical vibrations, hearing snippets of conversations, things like that. However, once I was lying on my back meditating in my bed, and when I got really deep, I started hearing this rushing sound in my ears and feeling like I was being pulled backwards and down through the mattress. All of a sudden, I woke up and I was lying on my stomach in a field. Daylight was happening and the sun was bright, so I was squinting when I opened my eyes and looked around. I was in a countryside somewhere, and I'd lived in New York City, with mountains in the distance. I started pulling out blades of grass and feeling the dirt in my hands to check that I was really there, and it felt very real. Then I noticed, looking down at my hands, that they were the wrong skin color. I wasn't freaked out, just curious about the situation. It was me, but it was like I was seeing through somebody else's eyes. Everything felt very familiar, like I remembered it from somewhere. There were a lot of little details, but to keep a very long story short, I walked into a little house that I knew was my own. I saw my mother and my little sister. These are in air quotes, by the way. I remember everything about her face, from her hair and eye color, and a mole that she had on her cheek. Then I went out onto a dirt road on the side of the house and started walking towards town. At some point, a horse and carriage was coming down the road and in my direction, and as it passed, I looked up at the driver and made eye contact with him. And at that moment, I heard the rushing again, and I felt myself pulled back, and I was in my own bed. It happened so long ago, and I still remember every detail. I've always had really vivid dreams, like I usually remember upon waking, but this didn't feel like a normal dream. Since then, I've had a few dreams that felt different than my normal ones, where I felt like I was seeing through somebody else's eyes. I've also been falling asleep and randomly heard this rushing and felt the pulling sensation twice, but both times I recognized that it was happening. I just got scared and I woke up. Something is in my house. So I bought an old farmhouse in November. The backstory on the house is that it used to be a workers' home for the plantation. They had an old brick well to use, so the original house was torn down, and then my current house was built by a couple in 1951. They both died in the house, and then a new family moved in around 2005. And according to my neighbor, they were a very nice and loving family up until the last few years. The husband became extremely abusive, leading to the rest of the family leaving. Shortly after, he hung himself in the attic. There's still scratch marks on the walls and rope burn on the rafter. I'll make another post with pictures this weekend, since I don't go into the attic at night. Once I moved in, within the first 2 weeks, I was noticing doors and cabinets being left open, when I know they were always closed. Then came the noises of people walking around the house, so I thought I had a squatter living somewhere in there. While searching the entire house, I noticed closed-off parts of the house that held little rooms in them, all unfinished. But this one room is what holds my attention. Inside was children's toys, cars, dolls, but along with them was old porn from what had to be from maybe the 70s, with as much bush the people had. There was also 3 steel boxes full of weed, and what I'm assuming was crack and crack pipes. There was also an old shotgun, or rather old shotgun shells. The whole thing threw me off. I should also mention that the house had been empty since 2011. I ultimately came to the idea that I had a squatter, so I installed cameras in every room from the basement to the attic as well as outside. I never found anyone on camera, but they do pick up sounds inside the house. Eventually, I did get a video of where you can hear someone walking in the attic from the living room camera, and it picks up the dust falling from the ceiling as well. I might still have that video and another video that the camera was picking up a figure moving inside the picture frame. If I do, I'll post those later as well. Since it's an older house, the floors were a little bit crooked. So I had a contractor come over and come into the crawl space to look at leveling the floors while he was in there, and we discovered the old well, which was actually terrifying to see, an uncovered red brick well. I'll post pictures of it in my later post. I've gotten into the habit of saying goodbye and hello to the house when I leave and I come home from work. I've also sat in the kitchen one day, after last walking around upstairs thing, and said, if you want me to fix, then run down shitty house you got, chill the fuck out. Which I thought it would work. The house was quiet for a while, until the last 2 weeks. The next 3 things all happened in my master bedroom, which unfortunately is directly above the well. We were lying in bed and suddenly heard something crinkling in the corner of the room where I keep a contractor trash bag and throw all my clothes that I ruin at work in. We look over, and the back is sort of sitting like someone's trying to lift it up from one edge, which at this point I'm kind of just used to in the house. Another night we were laying in bed and I had my legs out of the blanket, and then the blanket just slowly started to move and cover them up. That definitely freaked me out. Finally, last night, I was asleep and the fiancé was watching the new Dexter series, and I was woken up to what sounded like a door slamming and her freaking out saying someone was laughing right outside of her door, and then ran around for a while till they slammed the door twice. I checked the cameras, they didn't pick up anything. So I'm not sure what this thing is doing or planning, but I do hope that it calms the fuck out. And just, again, since I was just in the kitchen talking to the house and saying my goodbyes and hellos, and said that if you don't chill the fuck out, I will burn this shit to the ground. I'll try to get pictures posted as soon as I have daylight to go into the attic. My friend kept our Nerf fight going months after he died. Last October, my best friend Tanner died unexpectedly due to causes that can't be mentioned due to the sub's rules. I don't need to go into too many details, but they're not relevant to the story. But it was easily one of the hardest hitting losses I've ever had. He and I shared a very close and special bond and overcame a lot of life together. He had moved in with our mutual friend Beth and her boyfriend several months prior to passing away. So I would constantly come over and hang out with everybody as I lived nearby. One summer day, we all had a giant Nerf gun fight together in our front yard. I distinctly remember making eye contact with Tanner and having a strange gut feeling at the time that this was a bittersweet moment, but brushed it off as being sad that summer was coming to a close. I felt uneasy, though, that he had the same sad, that longing look in his eyes that I did. It began to get dark out. After collecting as many darts as we could, we headed inside as Tanner declared, "This isn't over yet." A month later, after noticing many strange behaviors, Beth and her boyfriend made the heavy decision to call Tanner's mom and have her convince him to go back to rehab. 3 months later, Tanner was dead. I moved out of state since, but always go back to visit Beth when I'm home. One day after heavy snowfall, I pulled into Beth's driveway. Just as I hopped out of my car, Beth came to the door to greet me. Something yellow popped out against the fresh snowfall, immediately catching both of our attention. We looked down, and directly on her front step, perfectly placed in the untouched snow, was a Nerf dart. Well played, buddy. Possible experiences with a possessed object. To start, my female who's 20 years old fiance and I, a male who's 21, moved into our new apartment in October of 2021. This is our first place together. We hadn't had any strange or unexplainable experiences until this. For some background context, my fiance's mom died after a very severe car accident when he was 11. She was in a coma and ended up not making it out. It was an extremely traumatic experience for him. After this, he told me about some odd experiences that he had at his house after she passed. Seeing a figure in his kitchen at night from his bedroom from time to time, constantly feeling like he was walking through cobwebs, quote unquote, and similar moments that he ultimately brushed off as his imagination. Fast forward to December of 2021, we went over to his childhood home to help his dad decorate for Christmas. He just went through a divorce, and this allowed him to bring out decorations and such that hadn't been touched since she passed. While going through the bins, he found a stuffed snowman that belonged to my fiance's mom. He and his brother decided to take a few things as keepsakes, and the snowman was the only thing that we ultimately brought home. Immediately, we both had a strange feeling towards it. Nothing concrete, just an uncomfortable sensation being around it. Because of this, we put it into our bedroom closet. About 2 weeks after this, I went into the closet to grab a candle I had left in there from a recent shopping trip, and I couldn't find it anywhere. I looked through our entire apartment for 2 to 3 days and eventually gave up, thinking that we must have thrown it away. A week later, I walked into the same closet to pull some of our holiday decorations away, and lo and behold, the candle was exactly where I left it originally. I decided not to read into it and left the curiosity alone for the most part. We did, however, move the snowman to our utility closet after that experience, just on the off chance that something was going on. Now, about a week ago, my fiancé opened the utility closet. We go in there daily, it's where he stores his work gear and his shoes, and asked if I had moved the snowman. I told him I hadn't. I had honestly forgotten about it, and he became very anxious. He had left the snowman sitting on a box, arms and legs hanging down in a natural position, and this time the snowman's left arm was propped up against the wall, almost like it was trying to wave. Again, against our better judgment, we left it in there. We did put it in a grocery bag just to make sure it didn't change positions or move. 3 nights ago, I walked into the kitchen to grab some water before getting in bed. My fiancé was getting ready for bed in the bathroom. The bathroom is attached to my office, and the office door opens to the living room and kitchen. As I grabbed my water, I decided to go ahead and tie my hair up for the evening. I took my glasses off, flipped my hair upside down to put it into a hair tie, and my office door creaked shut. I immediately asked my fiancé if he had shut the door, and he said he shut it when he went into the bathroom 10 minutes prior. We decided at this point that if anything else happened, we would get rid of the snowman. Yesterday afternoon, while my fiancé was at work, I found a thumbtack on the floor in front of our trash can. The trash is about 8 feet from the utility closet. I thought it was odd, since we're extremely careful about them, as we have 2 cats, but I just picked it up and threw it away. I did take note that it was used, had a bit of that white-yellow plaster from our walls, and was slightly bent. This evening in passing, I mentioned to my fiancé that I found a tack on the floor yesterday. He immediately stopped, went to the closet, and noticed. He had put a tack that he removed from the wall next to the bag with the snowman 2 days ago, and it was now gone. He asked if it had anything distinct about it, so I let him know about the plaster and the bend. At this point, we both decided that it had to go. He took the snowman out of the bag and got ready to leave. He suddenly told me that he felt dizzy and had a headache. He was acting different than usual, tone of voice, body language. And to not freak myself out, I just decided he was anxious because I was having a panic attack. We got dressed, left with the snowman, and dropped it in the trash at the local gas station. He told me on the way home that he couldn't stop looking at the snowman when he took it out of the bag, and that it was making him feel sick in a kind of off way. He immediately felt better once we got home. I know this must sound insane, and I don't know what any of this really means, but I'm still terrified. I can't stop thinking about this. I wish we had done this earlier, and I'm scared that something is going to come from it. Any advice or similar experiences would help with my peace of mind. The Haunted Old Tape Recorder, the Japanese samurai music. When I was working for a company as a junior chief editor, I had to work late and volunteer for late-night shifts. The staff was broken up into teams of 6, and we had to take turns working the late-night shifts in the office. Since we were in a group of 6, we weren't afraid to be in the office at night. We used to have light music switched on while we worked our shifts at night. We also used to bring our food from the house, as ordering online was a waste of money for some of us. Thusly, One night, as we were doing our late night shifts at the office, one of us brought a tape recorder that plays only cassettes. We were impressed that our colleague still had that old tape recorder with her, and she told us that it was her late grandfather's. So, we wanted to try the old tape recorder out. So she inserted a cassette into the recorder and pressed the play button. She told us that that particular cassette has mostly old Shah Rukh Khan songs from the film, excuse me for trying to pronounce this, it's spelled C-U-C-H, Kuk Kuk Hota Hai. So most of us knew the playlist from that film, and we started enjoying the track list as soon as it started. The songs were playing fine till the end of the track list, and then it repeated. We didn't really mind listening to the same songs again, as we filled the cold void around the office. Everyone knew the cold and chill air around us that night, and in fact, we would feel it every other night or two in the office. Sometimes we would hear plates and cups clattering in the pantry as if someone was in there making themselves a drink or food, when all of us would be at our tables doing our work at night in that office. Some even reported seeing a shadow coming from the lift, but no one really came out of it and made the lift door open for a very long time. So as the songs were playing from that old tape recorder, most of us knew the track list order, so we knew what song came next after the song from the cassette. When the song Kuk Kuk Hota Hai ended, we knew that the next song was Sajanji Gar Ai, but a different song came, totally unrelated to the movie or the language. We looked at each other in shock and quickly asked the staff who brought the recorder to the office if she had saved more than one movie song in that cassette. She denied that she saved songs from any other movie other than Kuk Kuk Hota Hai. That staff tried to replay and rewind the cassette to play in order, but that different song played instead. Finally, she took the cassette out of the recorder and told us to just play our usual music from our computer. As we were searching for the usual music from our computers, we suddenly heard soft music coming from the pantry. It was the same music we heard from the tape recorder just a while ago. We knew it was time to leave the office immediately, so we quickly checked out from the office. The staff who brought the tape recorder was too afraid to even take the recorder back with her, so she left it in the office that night. The next day, when we came back to the office in the morning, we noticed that the cassette from the tape recorders was broken, and the cassette film was out of the cassette itself. Till now, the tape recorder is heard to be playing that same music again and again in the office at night. The music is none other than Japanese samurai music. You've just reached the end of today's stories, and I just want to thank all the people who sent us these very lovely accounts to read, and particularly the account maybe 4 or 5 stories in, right as they were being strangled. My hose that's located maybe 15 feet outside of a glass door, that's never worked since I have been renting this place, blasted itself on and scared the life out of me. So, I don't know if stories can be haunted, but at least for this narrator, I kind of think maybe that's true. And it's actually happened a lot in the past also. Believe me, you can ask my wife. So, until next time, thanks for supporting Paranormal M.